Welcome everyone, my name is Brennan Snyder. Thank you for joining me. Today we're going to take a look at former Bad Company singer Robert Hart and his brand new album called Pure. This album here is very interesting in that it's definitely a throwback to the 80s, and it's much more melodic rock with a merger of synth pop than the straight up Bad Company hard rock that he did in the mid 90s. The two main people involved in this are Tommy DeNander and Steve Overland. Steve Overland being the lead singer from FM. And Tommy DeNander, I mean, he's been around working with everyone. He's worked with Alice Cooper, Deep Purple, Steve Perry most recently on his solo album. He's also worked with the guys from Toto and Kansas. So he's really been around the block, and definitely interesting to have him working on this project with Robert Hart. A little background on Robert Hart though, he's been kicking around for a long time. He got started as a solo artist and first released a 1989 album, Cries and Whispers, and then a follow-up solo album, self-titled Robert Hart, in 1992. During that time frame, he was part of a group called The Distance with Bernard Edwards, and they did release one album called Under the One Sky in 1989. But around the early 90s, though, he got contacted by Bad Company to take over for Brian Howe, and they did record Company of Strangers. It came out in 1995, a real great blues rock return to form for Bad Company, much in the vein of Paul Rodgers, their original vocalist. And then in 1996, they released Stories Told and Untold, and this one here is a cool one because it's got acoustic re-recordings of classics along with 7 new tracks that are on it. And then since that time, in early 2001, he formed the Jones Gang with Kenny Jones, formerly of The Faces and The Who, and Rick Wills from Foreigner. It's a little super group here, and they did this album, which is a fantastic one, especially if you like the Bad Company style stuff that he's done. And then since 2011, he's been the lead singer for Manfred Mann's Earth Band. And in 2014, he joined a group called Diesel, and they released this album called Into the Fire. And this one here too is very, very much in the vein of Bad Company. So if you're looking for stuff like that, I highly recommend this album here, Diesel. But the one we're going to talk about is this one, his solo album. And like I said, it's a bit curious because it's a total throwback to the 80s. As I said, all the songs are written by Steve Overland and Tommy DeNander, but this album is like a blast from the past. If you didn't tell me this album was recorded brand new today, I would have totally thought this was something pulled out of the 80s. It's definitely in the vein of AOR 80s rock, and I would say it's similar to Steve Winwood and his stuff that he recorded in the 80s. There's a definitely big production on this and a heavy focus on keyboards. But the thing is, there's equally a lot of guitar on this. So it's got that 80s synth rock thing to it, but there's some very cool guitars on this. And of course, with Robert Hart, you've got the soulful, powerful, emotive vocals that he's known for. But the music style as a whole is very much in the funky, groove-oriented style. It's all peppy and upbeat. There's actually no ballads on this. And then, of course, the synth keyboards and everything adding a very atmospheric style vibe to this. And there's 3 tracks I want to point out on here that really stood out to me that I think are really strong and good. Track number 3 is called Sensational, and the track is sensational. It's a harder edge keyboard start to it with some really strong vocals, but when the chorus comes in, it's just big 80s over the top like you couldn't imagine. It's really great. Track number 5, This Is the Night. This is one that I would call one of the more dance-oriented numbers on here, but the way that they layer the guitars and intersperse the guitars on it, it's much more than the way that the synth beats would suggest this just being a dance number. I almost compare this a little bit to like Michael Jackson's Billie Jean, the way that it's done, and take a listen to it. I think you'll agree with me. And track number 7 on here called Double Trouble. Now this one's a real straight-ahead rocker, much more in the vein of the Bad Company style stuff. So there's a little bit of everything on here, but this is definitely much more in the vein, like I said, of the throwback to the 80s. Sort of the bottom line is, every one of the songs that are on here sticks with you long after you listen to it. For me, I listened to the album, and even though this is much more in the synth pop 80s vein than straight ahead rock, I totally wanted to re-listen to this album. It was really that good. And you know, as I said, I think it sounds like a lost classic from the 80s. It's just really that well written. Ultimately, I wonder why, you know, Robert Hart's not much more well known of a vocalist than he is, but at least we have these solo releases and things like this from him to continue to listen to and enjoy. All right, I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, please remember to comment, like, and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts. I hope everyone has a great day. Stay safe, and I'll see you all real soon. Take care. Bye-bye.